Welcome to Journey of Self-Awareness, where we've been discussing paradoxes that one inevitably encounters on a spiritual path. The main one being the paradox of being versus non-being, or existence versus non-existence, or what some call nihilism. With the question, is the glass half full or is it empty? Of course, emptiness is a concept that we're going to want to talk about today. Now, of course, the Buddha himself grappled with this profound paradox of being and non-being, and he ultimately rejected extreme views. Instead, the Buddha advocated a middle way to navigate the profound paradox between existence and non-existence, or between being and non-being. The middle way steers a course between these extremes by asserting that nothing has an inherent independent existence, while also acknowledging the conventional reality of the world that we experience around us. So the middle way paradoxically points to the existence of being and non-being. Absolute existence is negated, but a relative interdependent mode of being still operates on the conventional level. This is summed up in the famous verse from the Heart Sutra: form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than form. Form and emptiness are inseparable. So Buddhism differentiates then also between two levels of truth or reality. On the one hand, we have relative truth, which is conventional or provisional truth of everyday mundane reality. Sometimes I call it mundane truth. And absolute truth or ultimate reality, on the other hand. This distinction between two realities was more fully developed about 600-700 years after the Buddha by Nagarjuna, who founded the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana Buddhism. Relative truth is the truth of worldly convention. It's also called world speech truth, which hints at the influence of language on our perceptions of reality. It's also called truth that keeps the ultimate truth concealed, which refers to false cognitions of external things which don't exist the way we might think they exist, or the way in which we're perceiving them. This notion of the truth that keeps the ultimate truth concealed hints at Hindu notions of Maya, of the illusory nature of reality that keeps us stuck in samsara or cyclical existence. So we should point out now that recognizing two possible truths doesn't deny the existence of an objectively real external reality. So Buddhism doesn't go as far as the postmodernists. It merely argues that if such a reality exists, we're misperceiving it due to our false cognitions and our ignorance of ultimate reality, or the ultimate truth. So this brings us to this notion of dependent origination. Nagarjuna also argued that everything we perceive is empty of an inherently existing self, nature, or essence, that all things arise through mutual interdependence. So we might think of cause and effect, the modern concepts of cause and effect, except that in this case, there's not just one cause and one effect. Dependent origination views change as being the result of very many factors, perhaps an infinite number of factors, not just one or even a few. It holds that Within our field of perceptual awareness, everything is bound up in a vast web of seemingly infinite causes and effects. Everything that arises has depended upon other pre-existing phenomenon, and in turn, current phenomenon are conditioning what's going to happen in the future or what will arise in the future. And as such, everything we see in the world has been produced by a multiplicity of causes. This gets us to this notion that a butterfly can flap its wings in the Brazilian Amazon rainforest and it'll cause a tornado in Oklahoma, for example. So, in this Buddhist view, everything we perceive is impermanent. Everything is dependently originated, and nothing is permanent or stable. Nothing has any intrinsic self-nature or independent existence. This is really the true meaning of emptiness, or what is sometimes called shunyata. Everything is empty of an independent or an essential essence. We can verify this for ourselves by attempting to locate our perceptions within our field of awareness, by interrogating our sense perceptions or our emotions. What happens, for example, to anger when you realize that the person that you were angry with was completely innocent? It can evaporate in thin air, and this brings us up to the notion of perceiving a snake and, opening the door and seeing a snake and realizing when you turn the lights on that it's just a coil of rope laying on the ground or an extension cord wound up on the ground. What happens to your fear when you realize that your perceptions were completely erroneous? So these are some of the kind of metaphors that are used to help explain this emptiness of independent essential essence. Of course, this also includes all of our mental or conceptual constructs, which are also impermanent collections of causes and conditions. So, the mental constructs of the egoic self, the sense of an I, of mine, a me, this sense that of a separate self that leads to grasping and craving and suffering, it's also a temporary mental process that lacks intrinsic existence. All of our different mental states condition one another over time, and different mental phenomena are conditioning one another each and every single moment, dependently arising like relative reality itself in this vast sea of causes and conditions. Everything is interrelated and interdependent. So the middle way then embraces the paradoxical nature of reality. It rejects both metaphysical extremes of being and non-being, of existence on the one hand or nihilism on the other. Of course, it attempts to do this while also still accounting for our lived experience of an interdependent world that's constantly emerging and constantly becoming and ceaselessly arising. Our perceptions, our thoughts, our emotions, continually coming and going like water under the bridge. Now, I know these distinctions are subtle. The Buddha himself said that this is hard to see, it's difficult to understand. We generally don't see, nor do we understand, all of the interdependent causes that give rise to all of the perceptions in our field of awareness, and what some practitioners call the super matrix of the all good. It's like the bubble of our own awareness that we're perceiving things within. So we tend to view things, of course, as permanent, independent, and existing out there in an objective reality, but Nagarjuna comes along and says, no, this is not necessarily the way things are. The Buddha said that this world mostly relies on dual notions of existence and non-existence, but he argued that neither of these propositions can really stand on their own. While at first glance this perspective doesn't seem to be very helpful, Nagarjuna came to our aid with a famous formulation that encapsulates the paradoxical nature of reality. Concerning this relationship between being and non-being, he said, in essence, that it is not, it both is and is not, it neither is nor is not. Does it exist? Well, it doesn't. Well, it's neither and it's both. By laying out these possibilities and negating all of them simultaneously, Nagarjuna pointed out the ultimate inexpressibility and the paradoxical nature of reality that transcends our conceptual formulations. He's pointing to the idea that reality can't simply be reduced to existence or non-existence, being or non-being. It's neither purely existent nor non-existent, yet it also can't be correctly characterized as both or neither. Nagarjuna's formulation helps us break through conceptual extremes and rigid philosophical perspectives or viewpoints. It reveals the paradoxical and ineffable nature of the ultimate truth that can't be captured by thought or language alone. So, in essence, he's embracing the paradox. It is and it isn't, while it's neither and it's both. And he's doing so as a way to point towards the inconceivable nature of reality beyond the limits of our logic and reason and rational thought. So like a Zen koan then, this paradox itself is its own resolution. It's designed to help us get beyond our conceptual limitations. Similarly, emptiness or shunyata is taught in order to completely pacify the discursive mind, to silence our mental chatter and our constructed narratives, and to go beyond the limits of conceptual thinking. So the middle way in Buddhism is not nihilistic. It's not negating our experiences. Instead, it's mediating between the extremes of nihilism on the one hand, or non-existence, and eternalism or existence on the other hand. Now, as I mentioned, conventional reality refers to our everyday experience of the world. We perceive a solid, independent reality around us. This is a valid way to interact with the world in our daily lives. On the other hand, the ultimate reality is that things lack an inherent existence. Phenomena are empty of inherent existence. They arise dependently on causes and conditions. They're constantly changing. So the middle way is an attempt to avoid extremes. It acknowledges both conventional reality and the world we experience, while also acknowledging the ultimate truth of emptiness and emptiness of inherent existence. So this is the way in which the concept of the middle way and these Buddhist philosophy concerning the two truths attempts to navigate these profound paradoxes. It encourages us to not get hung up in this and to relax and let things go, let things transpire, accept the way things are, and to keep a very open perspective, a very open-minded viewpoint of of our own personal experiences, of our own emotional reactions, of our thoughts, of our interpretations, and the ways in which we're interacting with the world through our experiences and our perceived reality. Well, thank you for watching again and for tuning in. Be sure to come back again next week. If you haven't done so, subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. We're going to be talking about pride and spiritual pride as one of the final obstacles on a spiritual path, and then making a transition into discussing specific spiritual practices that we can use to help loosen the grip of the egoic self and pave the way for an awakening experience. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Journey of Self-Awareness. Bye-bye.